in the wake of World Championship Wrestling, but before things went all elite, there was one promotion that was a continual thorn in the side of Vince McMahon. And while they did attempt to go to war, even if they came up short, they're still around to this day. Say what you will about them, but there is no denying that even though they never took the #1 spot, they still made quite the impact. How did they do it? Well, this is the story, so sit back and relax because this is the history of total non-stop action wrestling. In 2001, with WCW now owned by the WWF and Jeff Jarrett out of work, he along with his father Jerry Jarrett were on a fishing trip when they were talking about WWF's newfound monopoly over the entire wrestling industry. And they were talking about this with wrestling community innovator Bob Ryder, who was formerly the head of the pro wrestling area for Prodigy Online. Yeah, let's see who remembers that. Not only that, but Ryder also conducted WWF's first online interview back in 1995. Ryder discussed the possibility of creating a wrestling promotion that instead of relying on television used pay-per-view only. After all, trying to broadcast nationally was a major factor in what took down ECW, so why not try a different approach? But they wouldn't be starting from complete scratch, as they would also secure the backing of the National Wrestling Alliance. Thus, in the void created by WCW and ECW, there was now a mad dash to fill the #2 spot in America as far as professional wrestling promotions were concerned, with companies like Chikara and Ring of Honor all springing up in 2002. Although the Jarrett's promotion would have the advantage by working with the National Wrestling Alliance, originally being known as NWA TNA, with the promotion having control over both the NWA World Title and NWA World Tag Team titles. Now, as for the company's name, who would come up with such a crass moniker? Well, that would be the work of Jeff Jarrett's friend, Vince Russo, who had signed on in July to be a creative writer for the promotion, as he felt that this name would denote an edgier product than that of the WWE. Now, at the start, TNA would air weekly on pay-per-view, with that being their primary source of income. Additionally, their home base would be Nashville, Tennessee's State Fairgrounds Sports Arena, a place that would affectionately be dubbed the TNA Asylum. From there, TNA was looking for a marketing and publicity outlet, so they hired a young woman named Dixie Carter. Dixie had worked for Levinson and Hill, a marketing and advertising firm, becoming vice president by the age of 32 before starting her own company that focused on sports and music representation. But then, as luck would have it, the major financial backer of Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, Health South Corporation, would be investigated for irregularities and thus pulled out of TNA. That's when Dixie went to her parents and convinced them that there was money to be made in the wrestling market, since WWE was doing so well but had no real competition. And so, by October, 72% of TNA's controlling interest was purchased for the sum of $250,000 by Dixie's parents' business, Panda Energy, a company that operated environmentally friendly power plants. Big surprise, they're no longer in business now. Is it weird that an environmentally conscious energy company can't stay afloat, meanwhile TNA somehow still can? From there, TNA would debut their first ever television show, Explosion, on November 27th, 2002. Originally, it would feature matches from the TNA Asylum as well as interviews. Then, just a few months later, in the following spring, a brand new president for TNA would be announced. That's right, Dixie Carter. The year after, TNA would withdraw from the NWA, but they would retain the right to keep using their championships, at least for a while. If you like what you're seeing, please make sure you hit that like button and make sure that you're subscribed. Now, with that being said, let's get back into the video. Moving forward, this is when TNA became more recognizable to what many fans think of them as today, with them creating a secondary weekly television show called Impact. Along with that, Impact also brought some other more familiar staples of TNA, such as the six-sided ring and their brand new home on Soundstage 21 in Universal Studios Florida, aka the Impact Zone. Following this, and the weekly pay-per-view model would be scrapped in favor of a more traditional monthly one instead, with Victory Road being the first. Additionally, at this time, Explosion would become a recap show of Impact and serving as more of a secondary program, although this wouldn't last for very long as they would go back to airing Explosion exclusive matches the following year. However, television wasn't a secure platform. Originally, Impact would air on Fox Sports Net, but the contract ran out in May of 2005. This resulted in Impact pre-taping several episodes in advance to cut down costs and only made them available through the internet, encouraging fans to view via BitTorrent and Real Player streaming. Huh, imagine that, a wrestling company encouraging that kind of behavior? Somebody tell New Japan. Although this arrangement wouldn't last long, having dispatched ECW, WWE was leaving Spike TV and returning to the USA Network, and so TNA swooped on in, with Impact debuting on Saturday, October 1st, 2005 on Spike TV. Meanwhile, Raw wouldn't make its official re-debut on the USA Network until Monday, October 3rd, meaning that technically they were both on the same network at the same time ever so briefly. Needless to say, it was imperative that this initial episode on Spike TV start things off with a bang, and they did just that, as this was the TNA premiere of the Dudley Boys, who are now going by the name of Team 3D. And they wouldn't be the only ones, as many other major stars would join the total non-stop action. Christian Cage, Scott Steiner, and probably their biggest get, Kurt Angle, who was one of WWE's top talents, and was arguably still in his prime. Then, in 2006, the company would begin holding traveling pay-per-views, with that year's Bound for Glory taking place in Michigan. This show would wind up being the highest pay-per-view buy rate ever for the company at the time, only to be topped the following month by TNA's Genesis. However, this would be the peak for total non-stop action wrestling, as Genesis still holds the record as of this recording. Now, the next major milestone for TNA came in 2007, and it was bittersweet, as the NWA began wanting more creative control over their titles. All the while, TNA was looking to create some of their very own, and with TNA not reporting to the Alliance about when title changes were happening, the two parties decided to go their separate ways entirely. Total Nonstop Action Wrestling would create brand new championships, with Kurt Angle officially becoming the first ever TNA champion, and Team 3D becoming the first TNA tag team champions. Although they would be crowned on an episode of TNA Today, which was an online show, and they wouldn't win it in a match, it would just simply be given to them. Yeah, and people think WWE is the only company that doesn't really care about tag team wrestling. Now, standing completely on their own, TNA was gaining some momentum, and many fans feel that these few years was when the company was at its best. However, everything would change in the fall of 2009, when Dixie Carter would hire Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan. The two men were given backstage power, with Bischoff on the creative team and Hogan working as a consultant. They would immediately begin an overhaul of the company. Jakks Pacific would start producing TNA action figures, the promotion would go back to using a more traditional square ring, a subject which is a point of contention among some fans, as there are those who feel that the six-sided ring is a signature of the TNA brand, while others will point out that no one trains on a six-sided ring and therefore it makes things more difficult for the wrestlers. In any case, the third and biggest change that would happen during this time would be the return of the Monday Night Wars, or more like the Monday Night Excursion, or Monday Night Mild Conflict that was quickly resolved. Dixie Carter had set out just like Ted Turner did the last time around, with the goal of becoming the biggest professional wrestling company in the entire world. And so, taking it straight to Monday nights to go against WWE's flagship show was decided yet again as the path in doing so. Things began when Hulk Hogan appeared on the Ultimate Fighter Heavyweights finale on December 5th to announce a special 3-hour live episode of Impact that would be airing on a Monday night, directly against WWE's Raw. Thus, the first shot was fired. Dixie would go on to say that Spike TV was not anticipating that they would win the night, but if they could manage to score the same number as they did on Thursdays while going against Raw, then that would be considered a win. Spike TV president Kevin Kay would say that the plan was to air quarterly specials on Monday nights, and if improvement was shown, then a permanent move to the time slot would be possible. However, things went even better than expected, as Impact drew an average of 2.2 million viewers. This was more than just their regular Thursday number, this was their highest rating ever, topping their previous record of 1.97 million. And as far as individual segments goes, Hulk Hogan drew in 3 million viewers for his portion of the program. And yes, Raw still won the night decisively with 5.6 million people watching at the time. Things weren't even close, as WWE countered TNA by having Bret Hart return to live WWE television for the first time since the Montreal Screwjob. But even with that, all in all, this exceeded all expectations. Hogan was proven to still be somewhat of a draw, and WWE countering them was seen as a good thing, since many fans realized that the competition of the Monday Night Wars made both companies perform better. Therefore, this might force both promotions to up their game. Now, with this perceived success, the original plan was thrown right out the window. TNA Impact would move to Monday nights on March 8th, premiering at 9 p.m. and airing there permanently. And by permanent, I mean for like 2 months. This episode got less than 1.5 million. The following week was even worse, drawing the show's worst rating in over 3 years. Then, when WWE decided to host the 2010 draft on April 26th, TNA's audience would drop by almost half. As a result, TNA would slink away with its tail between its legs, moving back to Thursdays on May 13th. How could this happen? Well, the cause behind this disaster could be attributed to many things. Just two of the plethora of reasons was first, why would they try competing against Raw during WrestleMania season when WWE is usually at its strongest? And secondly, why would they use the team of Hulk Hogan, Eric Bischoff, and Vince Russo? As WCW proved that this is not a winning team, especially with Russo himself being largely disliked by many in the industry and is often blamed as the major component for the downfall of WCW. Following this, Bruce Pritchard would take over as head writer in 2011, with Russo becoming a contributing writer instead. This arrangement lasted for a few months before Russo exited the company. He would secretly be rehired in 2013, but would leave once and for all less than a year later. Continuing on, in 2012, Panda Energy withdrew their stake in TNA, and Dixie Carter would take it on herself, becoming TNA's majority shareholder. After this, and Jeff Jarrett would exit the company as well, while still retaining his minority shareholder status, although this would change when he returned to the promotion in 2015, since a condition of his return would be that he have to transfer over his minority stake over to Dixie, which would increase her power to make her the sole shareholder. And alas, 2013 was when it all came crashing down, with company mainstay AJ Styles leaving the promotion as they wanted him to take a 60% pay cut. Then Sting, Team 3D, and many others would follow suit, all leaving TNA as well. And it wasn't just wrestlers, as Spike TV would decide not to renew their contract with the company, although they would sign an extension that saw the show moving to Wednesday nights. After this, TNA would then relocate to New York City and to Destination America, a much smaller channel that would now air Impact on Fridays. This would result in a massive increase for Destination America, not so much for TNA. Meanwhile, Kurt Angle, Eric Young, and Bobby Roode would all leave TNA, and Impact would move to Pop TV in 2016. And this is where things get to be a bit muddy, since what really happens depends on who you ask, as I'm talking about the calamity that happened with Billy Corgan. He was first brought on as senior producer of creative and talent development. Later on, it was reported that he had taken a stake in TNA directly from Dixie Carter herself. However, it has also been reported that he merely gave her a loan and that he never had any ownership of TNA whatsoever. Either way, after Dixie Carter became chairperson and chief strategy officer, Billy Corgan would be named as the new TNA president, at least for a brief period of time before discovering that he never had any ownership in the company. As a result, Corgan would leave the promotion and become the new president for TNA's old partner, the National Wrestling Alliance. Meanwhile, Anthem Sports and Entertainment would acquire a stake in TNA, although that would only be the beginning. Now, that was just a brief summary, as there's a lot of information about the downfall of TNA and how it became the company that we know it to be today. But that's gonna have to wait till an episode about the history of Impact Wrestling. If I ever do it, because quite honestly, does anybody want that? Does anyone really care? Anyway, let me know down in the comments, and please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, and make sure that you give this video a big thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all my awesome Patreon supporters, and as always, Dave knows